everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What the Forensics. My name's Nicole. I'll be the MC for this episode, and I am joined, like always, again by the lovely Journey and Rebecca. This episode, Journey is going to be telling us a bit about the case of Ted Bundy, who he was, what he did, and all that jazz. I was going to say fun stuff, not fun stuff. Just some housekeeping. Please leave us a review or comments if you so desire. We love to read them, and it really helps us out, tailored to kind of what episodes you guys want to see in the future. We do ask that you like, subscribe, and follow wherever you can, as this helps us grow and reach more of an audience. And while we do try our best from a research point of view, we can make mistakes, and we aren't professionals in this field, so we are still actively learning alongside you guys. So we just hope that you enjoy learning with us while we record these and post these. So with that being said, I would like to note that there is a listener's discretion advised, as there will be detailed descriptions and discussions of assault, sexual assault, and some of the victims were children, so there is some conversation around that. And even though he was a necrophile, Journey's not going to get into that, thankfully. So if you do have like a background knowledge of this case, that is something that occurred, but we felt for this episode we didn't really need to touch on that, which I can appreciate. So thank you, Journey.
Yep.
So yeah, get that out of the way. Journey, I know I'm sure everyone's heard his case. There's been a lot recently, I find too, in the media that's come out with like docuseries or movies, but do you want to provide us a little bit of context and information on who he was and what he did?
Yes, I am very excited to share his and his victims' stories. I guess I was in university when I first learned about him, and that's when the Confessions of a Serial Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes were coming out, and then I binge watched those, and then I had to walk home in the dark, and that was very scary.
Yeah, not a good combination.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, I fit the description of his victims, and it's dark out, and I have to walk home. Awesome. So that maybe wasn't my most intelligent time, but either way, I've organized this episode into a timeline just because there's so much stuff that happened. So I'm just gonna kind of go through it, kind of like point form in a sense. I also want to mention that there are victims of his that I don't discuss because they haven't been expressly linked to him. And I also don't discuss any potential crimes that may have occurred prior to 1973 because there's so much unknown about them and we do not have time. His childhood information is a little bit sketchy, so just take that under consideration. I also tried to find some information on his victims outside of them being his victims, so I apologize if any information I found is incorrect. And right off the bat, I would like to address something that I said in episode 68 that I'm pretty sure isn't true, having done more research into this topic. I, for some reason, said that Ted Bundy would kill his victims and then return to where the body was to have sex with them, that he also decapitated 12 of his victims and kept their heads in his apartment. That's not true. The source that I got that from was mixing up two killers.
It sounds like it might have been mixing up Jeffrey Dahmer, possibly.
I think it was Carol Bundy, who's apparently another serial killer.
Oh, interesting.
Someone, I can't remember the name of the other guy, but he didn't decapitate his victims and keep their heads in his apartment. They were often smashed to bits, pretty much. He was a necrophile. I didn't focus on any information of him returning to his site and having sex with the victims because I feel like that is largely, we don't know about that. People have just kind of said that he's done that. And if we do know that, then my bad. There's also so much information about him, so I'm sure I don't have it all, but I have a lot of it still, so just sit tight.
I mean, there's docu-series about him. There's so much to cover about this man.
There's so much on him. So to get started, he was born November 24th, 1946, as Theodore Robert Cowell in a home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont. He spent 2 months at this home for unwed mothers after being born because his mom was debating putting him up for adoption. However, her father wanted him to stay a part of their family. And so, according to some sources, Ted grew up believing that his mom was his sister, and he didn't learn that she was his mom until he was in high school or until 1969, I think, depending on which source you're looking at. And so, there are two theories about how his mom conceived him. The first is that she got pregnant from a one night stand with a war veteran who introduced himself as Jack Worthington, and that's what she told him. Everyone else believes that Louise's dad was violent and abusive, and so there are allegations that he actually fathered Ted. So a lot of his issues stem from being a product of incest. And I remember hearing that this wasn't true, but I couldn't find anything that was said explicitly why this wasn't true. So
I'd
there's
like
that.
I guess he's like long gone and not a threat anymore, but I'm curious if they would like sequence his genome or do his ancestry to see if they can actually identify that.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like this question is very easily answered.
Yeah.
But I guess he was cremated.
Ah, okay.
So yeah. And
That's
a lot of
fair.
this happened before DNA. So going into a bit more about his family life, his grandmother, and so they lived with his grandparents, or Louise's mom and dad. And his grandmother suffered from depression and agoraphobia, and his grandfather had a raging temper. He would often abuse their animals, employees, and family members. And there is a very strong possibility that Ted experienced physical or psychological abuse from his grandfather, even though he insisted until he died that they had a good relationship. But he's a serial killer. He lies a lot.
That's
And
fair.
then, right, in 1950, him and his mom, Louise, moved to Tacoma, Washington from Philadelphia. She gave him the last name Nelson so that people wouldn't suspect that he was illegitimate, which I don't understand because he was supposed to be her sibling. Anyway, that's a fact. On May 19th, 1951, so roughly about a year later, Louise, Ted's mom, married Johnny Bundy, and they both took his last name. Again, I'm not really sure why, because supposedly at this point he didn't know that his mom wasn't his sister. Ted did not like Johnny, and their relationship wasn't great over the years. Ted was also really upset with his mom for having him as an illegitimate child and not really knowing who his father was. And so I feel like this is kind of the beginning of his issues with women in general. And then his mom actually went on to have 4 more children with Johnny, 2 boys and 2 girls. So Ted was the oldest of 5 kids, which is crazy because I didn't know until 2 days ago that he actually had siblings.
Yeah, I didn't either.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And apparently he was actually quite close with the oldest of the 4, and they spent quite a bit of time together, and he was very, very, very upset by what Ted did, which is fair.
Understandable.
Yeah. And so as he grew up, he was teased for having a speech impediment, and he didn't make the school basketball or baseball teams, which really upset him. And kind of in the same sentence, my one source was like, his childhood was so normal, but it was also scattered with violent tendencies. And so there are reports from people who knew him that he liked to scare people, harm animals, and masturbate in closets at school, shoplift, and be a peeping Tom.
That's not great for a child.
Yeah, I feel like I couldn't find any clear information on this, but it was talked about a lot that he was introduced to porn at a very early age, and then it just kind of progressed into a bad thing. He was also quite shy, apparently, which made him a target for bullies. So growing up, didn't have the best childhood. In the spring of 1965, he graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in Tacoma, Washington. In the fall of 1965, he enrolled at the University of Puget Sound and attended school until the spring of 1966. And then from the fall 1966 to spring 1969, he attended the University of Washington. He was apparently quite successful socially and intellectually during his college years. The source went on to say that he had a number of healthy relationships with women or just relationships with women. And then another source also said that he dated the same girl from 1967 to 1969, who apparently closely resembled his future victims. But I couldn't find any more on that.
That's so eerie. Just because obviously at that point he wasn't actually killing people. Can you imagine this all finally coming out and the ex-girlfriend in university is like, oh my God, why do they all look like me?
Yeah, or his girlfriend who he had throughout the killings who matched
Yeah.
all of the victims with her daughter, who, when Bundy kills a couple younger women, his like stepdaughter pretty much was the same age as those victims. And so one of the docuseries actually talks to her a little bit about that. And she's like, she internal or like thought it was her fault that he was killing those she was like, what did I do? Was there something I should have done for him to not kill? Like, was he wanting to kill me but couldn't, so he killed these other girls? And very like, she obviously really struggled with it, as you would.
Yeah, that's so sad.
It was very sad. And so he graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology in 1969. And then in the fall of 1969, he re-enrolled in the University of Washington, I believe for law school. I'm not totally 100%. I couldn't find a lot of information on what he actually took in school. And then that October, he met Elizabeth Kendall or Elizabeth Klepfer, depending on the source. One of them is her married name and the other one is her maiden name, because she was married before she met Ted, and that's where her daughter Molly came from. And so very quickly, their relationship became very serious. Her daughter Molly was 2 at this time, and so she kind of grew up with Ted as a father figure, because I think they date until mid 1970s. And so February 1970, they got a marriage license, but Bundy tore it up during a fight and they just kept dating. In early 1972, they apparently got pregnant, but they decided to terminate the pregnancy because the timing just wasn't right for them. He was apparently going to start law school in the fall, and she needed to work so they could afford it. But I questioned the timeline a little bit on this, because he had either started law school or wasn't starting law school until 1973. Either way, in 1972, he also worked on the Dan Evans political campaign. And so he was originally a volunteer, but then he was brought on to a salary position. And his role was to follow Mr. Rossellini, Evans' competitor, and keep track of his schedule, his remarks, and occasionally question him directly on specific issues just to kind of gather information about him. And so Bundy posed as a college student working for his master's degree in political science by writing a paper on the governorship. And he would ask him questions at public appearances and transcribe them before giving them back to Evans' teams. And so he would also have to dress up and put on disguises and be so mysterious about it, which he really enjoyed. And I think he found quite a bit of freedom in being able to put on a fake mustache and no one knows who he is.
I think Bundy would have appreciated cosplay.
I think you're right. And so also during this time on the campaign, he started stealing things, which didn't really sit right with Elizabeth, but there wasn't much she could do about it, because she's like, well, I guess this is just who we are now. And then in the spring of 1973, he graduates from the University of Washington. At some point in their relationship, Molly, Elizabeth's daughter, comes forward with this horrific hide-and-go-seek story about him. So they were playing hide-and-go-seek. I don't remember how old she would have been. I want to say 5 to 7, but I could be wrong. And so they were playing hide-and-go-seek, and he had laid under a blanket completely naked. So when she took off the blanket, he was just naked. And she was like,
Gross.
what are you doing? And he's like, well, I can turn invisible, but my clothes can't. So I had to take all my clothes off so that I could turn invisible and you wouldn't see my clothes. And she was just kind of like, okay.
Yeah,
But she was a
okay.
kid. Yeah. So she kind of
Yeah.
rationalized it as a kid, because it probably makes perfect sense. Oh yeah, your clothes can't turn invisible. So whatever. And it wasn't until she was a little bit older where she was like, whoa, that was actually super messed up. And then she didn't tell her mom about this for quite a while because she was so afraid that like she would lose Ted. Like her mom would force
Mhm.
like break up with him. Like
That's so sad.
right? It was quite upsetting. Also in 1974, according to his girlfriend Elizabeth, he started acting very suspicious and would disappear for days at a time, especially after they had a particularly bad fight. And so this brings us into his first victim, Karen Sparks. So on January 4th, 1974, 18-year-old Karen Sparks Epley's house she lived in the University District. It was broken into by him. She was a student at the University of Washington in Seattle at this time. He broke off a metal rod from her bed frame and used it to beat her. He then used that same rod to sexually assault her. In the docuseries, she says, quote, "He smashed it into my vagina and into my bladder," end
Jesus.
quote. And he actually ended up splitting her bladder from how rough this assault was. He left and she stayed injured in her bed for about 18 to 20 hours before anyone found her. Her
Oh.
roommate thought that she was still sleeping, so they didn't come to check on her until later. And her room was in the basement, but I find it wild that they didn't know she'd been assaulted and had either slept through it or weren't home and just had no idea that this had happened in their basement.
Wait, like they thought she was sleeping for 20 hours?
Yeah,
Like
that's
if that's the case, you should still be concerned that someone is sleeping for 20 hours.
right. Yeah, it was just crazy. A lot of his attacks happen in houses with multiple roommates, and somehow no one hears anything.
Weird.
It just doesn't make sense. But unfortunately, as a result of her injuries, she's permanently brain damaged. She's lost 50% of her hearing and 40% of her vision. She has a constant ringing and roaring in her ears and has had epileptic fits, but she did eventually overcome them and they stopped happening. She was never able to fully recover her memory of the attack, which I think is a huge blessing.
Mhm.
Karen has really kept to herself about this attack and didn't really come forward with her story until she was approached by the producers of the Prime Video series Ted Bundy Falling for a Killer. And this is her first time really talking about what happened to her. She also expresses her desire to not let this define her because she is not only a victim, she's also a mom, a daughter, and a friend and wishes to be known as such.
Mhm.
And one other thing about her was that some sources referred to her as Joni Lenz, and I'm not really sure why, but
Hmm.
maybe it's just to give her privacy. I'm not really sure. About 1 month later, on February 1st, 1974, 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy, who is well known in the community for giving the weekday ski report on the radio, she was a senior at Washington State University and majoring in psychology, but her real love was working with special needs children. And she was living in a house with four other women at this time. She had gone to bed early the night before, just like normal. And at 5:30 in the morning, her alarm started going off. And her next door roommate kind of heard it, but fell back asleep until her alarm went off at 6. And she noticed that Linda's alarm was still going off. And so
That's
when she
not
went,
good.
yeah, not ideal. When she went into Linda's room to shut it off, she noticed that her bed was neatly made, which was odd since apparently she didn't make her bed until after she got home from her morning shift at work. Her boss called shortly after to see where she was, and the girls noticed that her bike was still in the basement and the side door was unlocked. And then her parents showed up for the dinner that Linda didn't make it to, and that's when they decided to call the police. And when the police arrived, they pulled back her bed covers and saw that her pillow was heavily stained with blood and her sheets were soaked with blood. They found her nightgown stuffed in her closet with the neckline kind of crusted with blood, and the clothes she had worn the day before were just nowhere to be found. And so it was later learned that Ted Bundy had broken into their house, beat her to unconsciousness, dressed her in her previous day's clothes, drove her to a secluded area before raping and murdering her and dumping her body. And it's again wild to me that no one heard anything. And yes, his common theme was to make sure they were unconscious before doing anything. He really liked his victims unconscious, but I still feel like you gotta have a bad feeling or know or hear something, especially if your room is right next to hers.
Yeah, like I don't know if there was, like they said, like the bed was like soaked with blood. Like I feel like something like that you would hear something.
Right? Or even like him breaking in, hearing the doors
Yeah.
open. Like
Yeah.
it, it's just crazy. Not that I'm trying to place fault onto any of the people, like the roommates. I'm just saying it's wild to me they didn't hear anything. Our next victim is Donna Gale Manson. And so on March 12th, 1974, 19-year-old Donna Gale Manson was a very intelligent college student and an expert flutist, apparently. And she was attending Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, which is just south of Seattle. And apparently, she was prone to taking off unexpectedly and then coming back with stories of hitchhiking to other towns. And she was also very fascinated with magic, death, and alchemy, which unsettled her friends a lot. And she would
Just a
often
witchy
say,
girl.
right? She sounds like she's just fun. And so she would often stay out late and ask friends to cover for her in class. She also struggled with depression. And so it took 6 days for her to be reported missing because of her habit of just randomly leaving. And so on March 12th, she had apparently left her room around 7 p.m. to attend a campus jazz concert when she was kidnapped and murdered by Ted Bundy. Her body has never been recovered, but Bundy did confess to her murder before his execution, and he claims that her remains were among those found in 1975,
Hmm.
which I'll get to in roughly a year. So, April 17th, 1974, we meet 18-year-old Susan Elaine Rancourt, who was one of 6 children and worked 2 full-time jobs 7 days a week to afford her tuition the summer before starting university. She was extremely shy, but absolutely brilliant with dreams of studying medicine. Her family had actually moved to Alaska before she started college, but she stayed behind to attend Central Washington State College. And she was averaging a 4.0 GPA while working full time in a nursing home, which
Damn.
is so impressive,
Yeah, that's crazy.
right? She jogged every morning and took karate classes. She had a boyfriend from a neighboring area, and she never went anywhere alone. And then on April 17th, she took a load of laundry to the campus laundry facility at 8 p.m. and then went to a meeting where they were looking for new dorm advisors. And the meeting ended at 9, and she had planned to meet up with a friend to see a German film, but never showed up, so her friend just went without her. And the last time she was seen alive was leaving the advisors meeting. And we don't find this out until later, but there were rumors of a man with bandages on his arm asking women for help. So it's believed that Ted Bundy had approached Susan and asked her for help with something before abducting and murdering her, as was his common MO. And then we meet 20-year-old Roberta Kathleen Parks, who goes by Kathy. She was majoring in world religions at Oregon State University. The week of her disappearance, which was May 6th, 1974, she had actually gotten broken up with her boyfriend and then gotten into a fight with her father. The day she disappeared, her sister called to tell her that her father had had a heart attack, and then she would call back later to tell her that he was okay. So there was a lot on her shoulders. She was very stressed out and emotional. And that night, she was on her way to another dorm to have coffee with friends, but she never arrived. Ted Bundy did later confess to raping and killing her. In May 1974, or also in May 1974, Ted met Carol Boone while working at the Department of Emergency Services in Olympia, Washington. They supposedly kept things platonic because he was also dating Elizabeth Kendall, but like I said, he's a liar. So who knows? Do you guys remember Carol Boone?
Her name is super familiar, but I'm not like I'm his case has is so long and complex. I'm
Yeah. You'll know her later. Um,
okay. Okay.
anyway, as soon as I saw her and heard her name, I was like, oh my God, I forgot about her.
She is very familiar in that picture. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Okay. Also, I wasn't sure if her name was Carol Ann or just Carol, but her full name is Carol Ann Boone. I'm going to refer to her as Carol. On June 1st, 1974, 19-year-old Phyllis Armstrong met a man with a cast on his leg having car trouble, so she stopped to help him. All of a sudden, she got a very weird feeling, kind of a chill down her spine, and jumped out of his car and just ran down the street away from him. And she was a student at the University of Washington, and she was really, really good friends with a future victim, Georgianne Hawkins. And so after this failed kidnapping, he drove to the town of Burien, where he abducts and kills 22-year-old Brenda Ball. Brenda was last seen in the parking lot of the Flame Tavern talking to a man with his arm in a sling, and her friends don't report her missing for 19 days because she was such a free spirit, similar to Donna Manson, and had a history of just disappearing for days on end, I guess. I also, in researching this case, realized how much I take being able to just text someone for granted just to know if they're alive.
Hmm.
10 days later, on June 11th, 1974, 18-year-old Georgianne Hawkins was living in the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority house in the University District of Seattle. The night of June 10th, she had gone out with a sorority sister to a party. She had stopped by her boyfriend's house to say goodnight to him on her way home. She was heading home early, but it was still like 1 a.m. To cram for a Spanish exam that she had had the next day. A friend talked to her out their window for a few minutes while she was in the back alley, kind of behind their houses. It was very well lit. There are multiple witnesses who see her leaving the alleyway. And at this time, she was only like 40 feet away from her house, which is crazy how close she was. 2 hours later, when her roommate noticed that she hadn't returned, she called Georgianne's boyfriend, who said that she left his house at 1 a.m. And so she promptly woke the house mother and they waited for Georgianne together. They called the police in the morning, and due to the disappearances of the other women in Seattle, the police took it very seriously. And it came out later that the house mother had heard a scream at some point in the night, but thought it was just people fooling around, so she went back to sleep, which is scary to live with. And
Yep.
then Bundy also confessed to his murder, or to her murder, before his execution. And though he was foggy on the details, he remembered how trusting she was. And he said that he asked her for help carrying his briefcase to his car because of his fake cast, and she obliged. He then knocked her out, stuffed her into the car, and sped away. She kind of came to before he killed her, and in her confused rambling, she said she thought that he had been sent to help her with the Spanish exam. And then he knocked her out again, and then pulled over and strangled her. And he claims that parts of her remains were found later this year in Issaquah, which I will get to in a bit. But her remains have never officially been found. And then it is now July 14th, 1974. It's a beautiful, beautiful day on the West Coast. So 40,000 people have gathered at Lake Sammamish. So there are several witnesses who notice a man with his arm in a sling approaching groups of women or just single women and asking them for help. 23-year-old Janice Ott, who worked as a probation case officer for King County Youth Service in Seattle, she felt that with her experience and kind personality, she could really help others who needed special guidance in changing for the better. And this job that she had worked so hard for had taken her away to Washington, leaving her husband of a year and a half behind in his own practice in Riverside, California. On the day of her disappearance, she was really missing him. So she had left a note for her roommate and told her she'd be home by 4. She biked to the park and was just, I feel like, just trying to just feel her feelings. She was approached by a man in a cast, and she begrudgingly went with him to help him and was never seen again. Later, like 2 hours later, 19-year-old Denise Naslund, who was studying to be a computer programmer and working part-time in an office to pay her way through night school. Her and her boyfriend of 9 months had planned a picnic that day to the park with another couple. And so she had walked off to the bathrooms around 4:30, but had never returned. And so her friends started to worry after a while, and they started searching for her. She had brought her dog, and so they had hoped that the dog had just kind of run off and she was searching for her dog, but they ended up finding the dog alone. It's also really scary to me that a lot of the things that I would consider keeping me safe, a lot of the victims had, and it didn't keep them safe. Like Denise was with a group of people and had a dog, and she was still managed to be abducted.
Yeah, she just went to the bathroom and it was like wrong timing to need to pee.
Right? It's just
Yeah.
crazy. And so there were a bunch of witnesses who heard Ted introducing himself to people as Ted. So they finally had a name, and because of the amount of witnesses they had, they were able to make a sketch. They circulated it, and then roughly 1 hour after abducting and killing Denise and Janice, Ted called his girlfriend Elizabeth and just like asked her to go out to dinner with him. And they went out for dinner, and she describes him as being just so normal and nice that, and she didn't really think anything of it until she saw the sketch.
Mm.
And so she kind of saw the sketch and the alias Ted and was kind of like putting two and two together. And she was getting really worried that it was her Ted doing these horrible things. And she also noticed when she was at his house earlier that he had crutches in his room. And then she also heard someone say that the man who was doing this was using crutches and fake casts to appear weak. And so she called the police anonymously with a friend to ask if he drove a bronze Beetle. And they said, yeah, he does. And she was like, oh, okay, good. It's not my boyfriend because his is like orange or brown or something.
There's all
Close
these
enough.
coincidences, but the color is the wrong shade of yellow.
Yeah.
So
And I feel like if I saw a brown Beetle in the right light, I would describe it as bronze.
yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, so she was just like, oh, phew, thank goodness. And then just went on with her life. It still kind of just like stayed in the back of her mind for quite a few years, or for quite a while. In August 1974, Ted Bundy was accepted into the University of Utah Law School and moved to Salt Lake City, Utah. On September 6th, 1974, a grouse hunter stumbled upon remains just outside of Issaquah, Washington, and investigators had found 2 jawbones, a skull, and 4 different femurs. That's all I know they found, but I'm sure there are more. The jawbone, skull, and 2 of the femurs, belonged to Denise Naslund and Janice Ott, but they weren't able to identify who the other 2 femurs belonged to. And because each femur belonged to a different person, they estimated that there were 4 victims there, at least 4 victims there. And so, like I kind of already mentioned, some sources, including Bundy himself, say that one of them was from Georgianne Hawkins, but it hasn't been confirmed. And then on October 2nd, 1974, 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox disappeared from Holiday, Utah. She was last seen riding in a VW Bug similar to Ted Bundy's. He told the detective that he left her body with Deborah Kent in a secluded area south of Salt Lake City, but she has never been recovered. And she wasn't reported missing until early December 1974, so almost 2 months later. Also in October, on the 18th, 17-year-old Melissa Smith was on her way home to get clothes for a slumber party after meeting a friend for dinner. She never made it home, and she was the daughter of the Midvale police chief, and her naked body was found 9 days later in Summit Park. Her head and body showed extensive damage as a result of a beating with potentially a crowbar. She had been raped, sodomized, and strangled, and her cause of death was a massive brain hemorrhage. October 31st, 1974, 17-year-old Laura Ann Amy, who had dropped out of high school and moved in with friends while working small jobs to support herself. She was talking to her parents daily, but it wasn't until November 4th that she was noticed as missing. She had gone to a cafe on Halloween night before leaving around midnight to go to a park where she was kidnapped, raped, and murdered. She was found in the American Fork Canyon in Utah. Her face was beaten beyond recognition. She had been strangled, sexually assaulted, beaten with a crowbar, and left naked. And she was found a month later, November 27th, 1974. On November 8th, 1974, 18-year-old Carol DeRanch was at the Fashion Place Mall in Murray, Utah around 7 p.m. She was approached by someone posing as a police officer who told her that they had caught someone breaking into her car and if she could come with him to see if anything was taken. And so when they went to her car, she didn't see anything that was missing, and he asked her if she could come with him to the police station to press charges on the guy they caught. She got a little bit nervous, and so she asked for identification, which I do believe he ended up giving her. She then got in his car and went with him. After a while, he pulled over, and she noticed that they weren't on the way to the police station. He then tried to put handcuffs on her, but only got one on. She opened the passenger door and was fighting to escape. He pulled a gun on her and told her that he'd, quote, blow her head off. And he followed her out the passenger door because she was able to escape. And thankfully, another car was coming down the road. She ran to get help, and they took her to the police station. All three of them, I believe, were able to identify him from a lineup and testified at his trial for attempted kidnapping. Her story has changed a lot. So kind of take what I said with a grain of salt. It has the gist of what happened, but may not be 100% correct. His defense team did a very good job drawing a lot of doubt on her story, unfortunately. Later that same night, around 10 p.m., 17-year-old Deborah Kent left the Viewmont High School auditorium in Bountiful, Utah. She had been watching a play with her parents and had to go pick up her brother from a nearby place. It was either a bowling alley, an ice skating rink, or a roller rink. No two sources said the same thing, so I'm really not sure. Her purse was found in the car, and she was never seen again. There were reports of a man hanging around outside the school, and witnesses described him to look similar to Ted Bundy. And they also found a handcuff key when searching the area that worked or was similar to the one needed for the handcuffs Carol DeRanche was found with earlier that day. And sadly, Deborah's body has never been found. There were apparently reports of some people hearing two short, terrified screams between 10:30 and 11, but they didn't hear or see anything, so they didn't really come forward until after she was reported missing. And kind of around this time, I think, Elizabeth had been hearing about the women going missing in Utah, where Ted had just moved. And so she was getting more and more suspicious of him, especially since women had stopped going missing in Washington. And so she had talked to the police a couple times, and each time they were like, no, we'd already looked into him. He's just not a good candidate. Like, we'll take his name down, but we really don't think, we already checked him out. He's fine. And she's like, yeah, I don't really believe you, but I've got nothing to go on. And why am I so convinced that my boyfriend's a serial killer?
Imagine if they just like took her seriously.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if they had looked into him, she's calling multiple times with quite a bit of evidence, it feels like.
And like new evidence each time she calls. She's like, hey, here's something else that I think links my boyfriend to this mystery murderer.
Yeah, it's so odd. And then in January 12th, 1975, 23-year-old Karen Campbell, who was originally from Michigan, where she worked as a nurse, her and her fiance/boyfriend person, Dr. Raymond Godowski, were vacationing at Wildwood Inn in Snowmass, Colorado. That evening, they were in the lounge with some friends when Karen went to go get a magazine that she had left in her room. She was gone for about 2 hours, I believe, before authorities were alerted. And she was found on February 18th, 1975, in a snowbank off of Owl Creek Road, only 3 miles from where they had been staying. And she was found naked, bloodied, and battered, with a high likelihood that she had been sexually assaulted. There's a lot going on in her story, in her personal life specifically. They were on like a family vacation. They had fought earlier in the day about when they wanted to get married. But then they had also fought when she was like, can you go get my magazine? I left it in my room. And he was like, no. So then they got angry and then she went to go get it, which is why he didn't think anything of it for 2 hours, because he kind of just thought that she was mad at him and taking some time to cool down. On March 1st to 3rd, 1975, the remains of Healy, Rancourt, Ball, and Parks were found on Taylor Mountain in Washington. Their skeletal remains showed severe blunt force trauma as well as many other injuries. Bundy claims that they also found remains belonging to Donna Manson, but it has never been confirmed. And on March 15th, 1975, 26-year-old Julie Cunningham, who worked in a sporting goods store and as a part-time ski instructor in Vail, Colorado, she was described as being very nice and very attractive. And at this time, she had just returned home from a trip with her boyfriend, who told her that he didn't want anything long-term. which upset her quite a bit. And so she called her mom to talk about it before deciding to go meet a friend at the local tavern. But unfortunately, she never showed up and her body has never been found. On April 6, 1975, 24-year-old Denise Lynn Oliverson had gotten into a bad argument with her husband before leaving on her pedal bike to go visit her parents. Her parents were not expecting her, and when she didn't return home that night, her husband just assumed that she was staying with them. And so he kind of decided to give her some time to cool off and then called her parents the next day to talk to her, but she had never arrived at their house. So he called the police and they searched the route where she had most likely taken and found her bike and sandals under a viaduct near the railroad bridge. And so Ted Bundy claims to have left her body in the Colorado River, but she had never been found. And I believe they were living in Grand Junction, Colorado at the time that she disappeared. And then on April 15th, 1975, 18-year-old Melanie Cooley disappeared from Nederland, Colorado. She left her small town high school and was just never seen again. And apparently she looked very, very similar to Deborah Kent. So I believe they just used that as more evidence that she was one of Ted Bundy's victims. Her body was found April 23rd, 1975 by county road workers 20 miles away from her high school. She had been bludgeoned on the back of the head, her hands had been tied, and a dirty pillowcase was left twisted around her neck. And Bundy confessed to her murder before he was executed, but unfortunately, we don't really know much more about her. On May 6, 1975, 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver was kidnapped and drowned in a bathtub. Ted Bundy describes that he discarded her body in the Snake River, but her remains have also never been found, which causes me to doubt a little bit about her drowning in a bathtub, because how do we know that if we don't have her body? And I don't really believe anything he says. It also is very different than any of his other previous victims. And she was taken from Pocatello, Idaho. And then on June 27th, 1975, 15-year-old Susan Curtis was kidnapped and killed while she was attending the Bountiful Orchard Youth Conference at Brigham Young University, or BYU. He later confesses to burying her near a highway, but her remains have never been found. On July 1st, 1975, 24-year-old Shelley Robertson was last seen at a gas station with a man in a beat-up old truck. She enjoyed hitchhiking to other states, so no one thought it was odd when she didn't return for work on July 1st. It wasn't until a long time later, I guess, when they realized that they had last seen her on June 30th, and then her body was found on August 21st inside of a mine in Berthoud Pass, Colorado. Her body was so decomposed that they weren't able to determine the cause of death, and Bundy confessed to her murder before his death, as well as some of his gas receipts actually place him in Golden the day before or the day of her disappearance, but nothing other than that has been confirmed. On August 16th, 1975, Ted Bundy was arrested for the first time in Granger, Utah at 2:30 in the morning after a brief car chase. Once he finally pulled over, police found masks, gloves, rope, a crowbar, and handcuffs in his car. And he was released the next day or something. I don't really know. He wasn't in custody very long. And after his arrest, he consented to a search of his apartment, where officers found a large book containing detailed illustrations on masochism and tortures. And supposedly, he had also been under surveillance since fall of 1974 during any of the times that he was in Salt Lake City as well. So he was kind of on their radar, even though they weren't really doing anything about it. At this time, his girlfriend Elizabeth Kendall was also interviewed, and she stated that he was capable of committing these murders and that she had been with Bundy for several years, but it wasn't until 1973 when he started demanding abnormal sexual relations with her. I didn't look into what those were. I don't really care because they're probably yucky. And then,
Understandable. If she describes them as weird and uncomfortable, and yeah, I trust her.
yeah, and I was like, I already know enough about this man. I don't need to know his sexual tendencies. And so then on October 2nd, 1975, he was identified by Carol DeRanche in a lineup. He was arrested and charged with the aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault of Carol and was held in the Salt Lake City County Jail. Apparently, 2 witnesses from the night Deborah Kent was abducted also identified him as the man hanging around the outside of the school, but they couldn't really do anything with that because they had never found Deborah Kent. And then on February 23rd, 1976, his kidnapping trial began. He waived his right to a jury trial and represented himself. He had apparently dated Anne Swenson for a brief period of time in early 1975, and they remained friends after, and she testified for him during this trial. Just as like she testified for his character, I guess. And so on March 1st, 1976, he was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping and was sentenced in July to a 1 to 15-year sentence in the Utah State Prison, which I don't understand how you can give a 15-year range, but
It's a bit
that's
much.
what he was given. Yeah. I was like, when do you decide then when he gets out? But he was also given the sentence for second-degree kidnapping, even though he was charged and convicted of first-degree kidnapping. So some people were a little bit miffed about that. Apparently, the first-degree kidnapping sentence is generally 5 years to life instead of the 1 to 15. So I don't really know why he was given that sentence. Later that year, on October 21st, 1976, he was charged with Karen Campbell's murder, which they were able to link to him through gas receipts placing him in the area when she was killed. They also found her hair in his car, and there were eyewitness accounts of him being at her hotel. They also found Melissa Smith and Carol DeRanche's hair in his car as well. And then on January 29th, 1977, he was extradited to Colorado to face the charges for Karen's murder. On May 23rd, 1977, he pleaded not guilty to Karen Campbell's murder. And again, he was acting as his own lawyer and had public defenders as legal advisors. On June 7th, 1977, he was left alone in the Pitkin County Jailhouse Law Library and jumped out of the second-story window and ran down the street. He was unshackled and unguarded when this happened, and there are reports of him injuring his knee or ankle from the jump. And if you kind of look at the picture that I have on the slide, when I say second story, I mean the top windows. The first windows are the basement that you can just kind of see, and then it's the first story, and then it's the second story.
Oh,
So
that's
essentially like 2.5 stories up, because the first story is there's a ground level and then the first story.
Yeah.
damn.
Which
That's a big drop.
right? It's huge. And he said, like, even if there were 6 stories, like, he was still jumping. Like, he was escaping,
Damn.
essentially.
Maybe they
Which
should
is
have
wild.
kept a better eye on their suspect.
Well, yeah. And because he was acting as his own lawyer, he was kind of given rights of a lawyer. So he was allowed to be unshackled in the law library. But I don't think he was ever supposed to be unguarded. And so people did lose their jobs after this. Like, quite a few police officers either resigned or were fired.
That makes sense.
Yes. And there was one quote from a city employee, and she said, "The sheriff's department was patently naive, bordering on criminally stupid, to leave Bundy in the courtroom alone." End quote, which, very well said. I agree. On the morning of June 11th, 1977, about 5 miles from Aspen on Castle Creek Road, there was a cabin that had gotten broken into. The owner had last checked it on June 4th, 1977, and they noticed when they checked again, I believe on the 11th, they found that a pump-action high-powered deer rifle and ammo were stolen from it, and fingerprints matched Bundy's. And so they now considered him armed and extremely dangerous, as well as an escape risk. And then I believe on the early morning hours of June 13th, 1977, he was recaptured driving a stolen 1966 Cadillac on the outskirts of Aspen. Police said that the driver had kind of slumped down and run off the road as their patrol car passed. And so they were like, that's suspicious, so they pulled him over. He claimed to be extremely fatigued because he had only slept a total of 10 to 12 hours since he escaped. and I just can't find it in my heart to feel sorry for him. And despite stealing the rifle, he was unarmed when he was apprehended, so that was good. And then on June 15th, 1977, he was brought in front of the judge again, and they added charges they were charging him with new things as well, which included felony escape, first-degree burglary, misdemeanor theft for allegedly taking the rifle, and felony theft for allegedly taking the car he was driving when captured. So now he's also being charged with murder and all of those things. October 1977, during the pre-trial evidence hearing, even though he was not charged with Melissa Smith's death, they used evidence of her death in this pre-trial evidence hearing because it was so similar to Karen Campbell's death and evidence. So they were really hoping that by highlighting similarities, they were also going to get him charged with the death of Melissa Smith. And it didn't look like anything ever happened. Like no one has ever been charged with Melissa Smith's death.
Yeah, I feel like you can't just like introduce evidence from another crime if he's not being charged with that crime.
Yeah, I thought that was illegal or like something like that.
Because it was before the trial had started, so they were still determining like what evidence could be used at trial, and so they were like, look at this evidence. Like, there's a chance that he was murdered, that he murdered someone else.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we don't care.
We can't do that, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really know what happened with that, but yeah. And then a couple months later, December 30th, 1977, he escaped again, this time from a steel jail cell. He lost 30 pounds and removed a light fixture in his ceiling so that he could climb through the 12-inch by 12-inch hole. He then crawled about 30 feet in an 18-inch crawl space before jumping down into an unoccupied jailer's apartment, changing clothes, and then walking out the front door.
What the hell?
Damn. Okay.
Yeah. And so
I think they wanted him to escape. Like,
right?
Like, we don't want to deal with this man. Man, he's too much work for us.
It's actually crazy, especially because he was last confirmed to be in his cell at 7 p.m. December 30th, and they didn't notice he was missing until afternoon on December 31st, the next day.
Wow.
And he had left blankets and books in his bed to kind of fool anyone who came looking for him, which worked too well, unfortunately. And apparently other inmates had like heard him planning this escape, and the officers had been warned that he was an escape risk. And so there was a plan to kind of weld the holes where the light fixture was, just to make sure they couldn't get out there. But they didn't make it to his cell room soon enough. And he probably knew that. So he was like, okay, well, now I have to escape by this date.
Wow.
Ironically, they had moved him to this more secure facility in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, because he was an escape risk. And so a nationwide manhunt followed this most recent escape. I've got a picture of what they posted after he escaped on the slide. They posted this description in January 1978, which I'm going to read to you guys, and it's funny. He's 5'11", 145 to 155 pounds, dark brown wavy hair, normally parted on the right side with a slender athletic build. He is known to wear glasses as a disguise. He had a thick mustache at one time and wore a beard on another occasion. He may be armed and is believed to be dangerous. Bundy's occupations include student, office worker, salesman, dishwasher, busboy, cook's helper, security guard, and laborer. He could revert back to one of these jobs. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from the University of Washington. Bundy is a very clever, intelligent individual. He can imitate a British accent skillfully. He occasionally stammers when upset. He gets bags under his eyes when tired. A cunning individual, Bundy successfully escaped law enforcement authorities on 2 occasions. He is left-handed. End quote.
Also laughing at the Wanted by FBI poster too, where it goes, caution, Bundy, a college-educated physical fitness enthusiast with a proper history of escape is being sought at. Like, why do we need to know that information?
Yeah,
Right?
Is that really what you're going to lead with to say, hey, danger, murderer on the loose, but he's like really smart and pretty good looking too.
And he's in good health. He's a physical fitness enthusiast, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, especially when they followed up with, while awaiting trial involving a brutal sex slaying of a woman at a ski resort. It's like,
Why do we
What?
care? Yeah,
That
that
should have come first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're gonna mention how
I
nice he is after.
Yeah. I also find it odd that it says born November 24th, 1946, Burlington, Vermont, not supported by birth records.
Yeah, like was he born? Were they
What do his
forged?
birth records? Yeah, what do his birth records
Yeah.
say? Does he right?
I don't get it. I also love that they list his social security number.
Yep. Yep.
Oh my god, I didn't even notice that. Just go impersonate him.
Right?
Oh my
Like,
God.
hi, my name is Ted Bundy. This is my social security number. Like, anyway, wild. So, FBI and Colorado and Utah are all looking for him because Utah has now been informed that he's escaped from Colorado, and they're like, well, we need to find him. So, they're all looking for him. January 8th, 1978, Bundy arrives in Tallahassee, Florida. For those of you who aren't familiar with Florida's layout, Tallahassee is very northern. It's close to the Georgia border. Whenever I hear something happens in Florida, I always assume it's down by Miami. I'm not right. So, one source I found said that he flew to Chicago, took a train to Ann Arbor, Michigan, drove a stolen car to Atlanta, and then took a bus to Tallahassee. I refuse to believe that a twice escaped kidnapper, rapist, and murderer who is being searched for by the FBI could publicly travel so easy. So I'm really not sure how he got to Florida. That being said, though, I don't think Colorado is that far from Florida. It's a bit of a trek, but
Okay.
still, he made it to Tallahassee. In the very early morning hours of January 15th, 1978, think like 3 a.m., he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house through a back door that had a faulty lock. He went into 21-year-old Margaret Bowman's room first, where he bludgeoned her with a piece of tree branch until her skull was shattered to the point they couldn't tell her injuries apart.
Wow.
He then choked her with pantyhose so tightly that her neck had almost broken. In the movie they made about him, they mentioned that her neck was like a third of the size it normally was. Like, it was so excessive.
I don't wear pantyhose ever really. I'm surprised that it allowed that to happen. I would feel like they would rip. I feel like they wouldn't have the tensile strength to perform such force.
Yeah,
Or
they're
to-
pretty strong until they get a hole in them.
Right. Okay.
And I feel like they were probably stronger in the 1970s as well. And the way he had it tied was like the crotch was kind of around her neck, and then he had the legs tied. Like, it wasn't just
Around.
one leg, kind of, which could add to the strength of it. He then moved on to 20-year-old Lisa Levy's room, where he brutally assaulted her as well. She was found with her right nipple bitten off, her left collarbone broken. She was strangled and sexually assaulted with a hairspray bottle, and there was a bite mark on her left butt, which became major evidence in this case. Once he had finished with her, he went to the room of 21-year-old Karen Chandler and 21-year-old Kathy Kleiner and started beating them with the same wooden branch. Before headlights had kind of shone into the room and spooked him. He then left the room and the house, but unbeknownst to him, Nita Neary was returning home late from a date and saw him come down the stairs and go out the front door. And detectives estimate that this entire thing took 15 minutes.
Wow.
Damn.
Wow.
Yeah. It
That's
is
crazy.
crazy.
So 4 victims in under or around 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Like, that's so fast.
That
I feel
seems
like.
inconceivable for one
person, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for like his size. If he wasn't a huge guy, like I could see how he would be unsuspecting in a sense, because you see all of this gruesomeness in this short time period. You would kind of see one person being him. Once we kind of find out who he is, be like, he couldn't have done it.
Yeah, right?
He's not capable of it, kind of.
Yeah.
He's just this like scrawny, attractive law student. Like,
Yeah, he could never.
There's no way he could do this.
Wow.
And so then after leaving the Chi Omega house, he ran 6 blocks to 21-year-old Cheryl Thomas's house, where he broke in and brutally assaulted her as well. Cheryl was found lying diagonally across her bed, barely conscious, whimpering and writhing in pain. Her face was starting to turn purple with bruises. It was swollen, and she had had several severe head wounds. And she actually suffered the worst injuries on that night. And if it weren't for her neighbors being able to hear what was happening to her through the walls, she may have died. Which brings me back to the point of the people with roommate didn't hear anything, but Cheryl with neighbors living close enough that they could hear her being brutally assaulted is wild. So Karen Chandler, Cheryl Thomas, and Kathy Kleiner all survived. Karen's injuries included broken teeth, jaw and skull fractures. Every bone in her face was broken. Many cuts, a broken arm, and a crushed finger. Kathy Kleiner's injuries included lacerations and puncture wounds on her face, broken teeth. Her jaw was broken in 3 places, and she had whiplash. And they had to put a pin in her jaw at a later date, which involved re-breaking her jaw and then wiring it shut for like 9 more weeks or something. And when she woke up in the hospital, she couldn't remember anything about the attack, but over the years, her memories have slowly started to come back. Cheryl Thomas's injuries included her skull was fractured in 5 places, causing permanent hearing loss in her left ear. Her shoulder was dislocated. Her jaw was broken in 2 places, and her 8th cranial nerve was so damaged that she never regained normal equilibrium. So her balance was always off. She wasn't released from the hospital for a month, and she was brought to the hospital in a coma, actually, and didn't wake up for 9 days. And she was a dance student at Florida State University, so this loss of balance was devastating for her. Police also didn't think that this was done by the same guy because they had had such a police presence at the Chi Omega house when they received the phone call about an attack at Cheryl Thomas's house. They were like, there's no way that this guy would just run a few blocks away and assault another person. And then at some point, they ended up getting a call from Colorado about Ted Bundy, which kind of made him the first suspect in this case. But they were like, no, the MO is a little bit different because the girls weren't lured away to somewhere else. Instead, they, yeah.
I would still take that pretty seriously. They're like, hey, twice escaped serial murder suspect. We think he might be in your state. Anything weird going on? And they're like, yeah, there is, but I don't think it's him.
Yeah, it couldn't be. The MO is different.
Yeah.
So they had his name, but they didn't really think he did it. Police and lawyers also theorized that Ted Bundy had stalked Cheryl and cased her house, but when he went to attack her, there was a guy outside fixing his car, which had broken down. And so this kind of spooked him, so then he just kind of kept on walking, went to the Chi Omega house, and then when his attack there got interrupted, he went back to Cheryl's house.
Damn.
Yeah. On February 8th, 1978, Ted Bundy approached a 14-year-old named Leslie Parmenter in Jacksonville, but got scared away by her older brother. On February 9th, 1978, on his drive back to Tallahassee, he kidnapped and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach in Lake City. Kimberly was very excited the day she disappeared because she had just been elected first runner-up to the Valentine Queen at her junior high. So she was, life was great for her. When she arrived at her PE class, or physical education class, gym class, she remembered leaving her purse in her homeroom class, so her teacher let her run off to get it. One of her friends went with her, and then once they had started to kind of return back to their class, her friend remembered that she had forgotten something else, so she went to go get it, and Kim kept going. When her friend had come back outside, she was kind of alarmed to see Kim going off with a man. And there were actually many witnesses that day who remembered seeing her leave the school with an angry man. And they just kind of all thought, oh, this father has been called to school to take his child home. And they all noticed that she was crying, and no one really thought anything of it, which
is alarming.
Very alarming, yes. And so the school called her home later that afternoon to routinely check on why she hadn't attended the rest of her classes, but she hadn't come home yet. And so the parents contacted the authorities, who went on the typical, like, oh, she just ran away. But the parents were very adamant that that wasn't what happened. The next day, February 10th, 1978, Bundy is added to the FBI's most wanted fugitive list. 5 days later, on February 15th, he was stopped by a Pensacola police officer for loitering, driving erratically, and driving with his lights off. The officer ran his plates and saw that the car he was driving was stolen. He pulled him over, and Ted Bundy ran away, and they got into a bit of a fight. I believe he ended up shooting Ted Bundy, and was so worried that he had killed him. But he was eventually taken into custody. They found several identifications and stolen credit cards, and Bundy refused to give them his name. They had no idea who he was. He gave them a stolen ID and was just like, I'm a Florida State University student named Kenneth, and I'll tell you my real name after I call some people to tell them that I've been like apprehended or whatever, because he wanted to call Elizabeth so that she heard from him first that he was like arrested.
How considerate.
I know. His
fingerprints are on the wanted poster. Why not just test his fingerprints there?
I don't understand how you just don't know who this guy is.
Yeah, like his face is plastered everywhere. I can imagine in a police station they probably have the wanted posters somewhere.
Right? You'd hope so.
Yeah.
And so 2 days later, he reveals his true identity. And one source said that he was taken back to Colorado to face pending charges there, because there was still the murder trial happening there. And he wasn't really a suspect in the Chi Omega case yet. So supposedly he was taken back to Colorado. I don't really know for sure. And then on April 12th, 1978, Kimberly Leach's body was found near the Suwannee River State Park under a shed, or inside of a shed. I don't know. There was evidence of sexual assault, but no head trauma, and it appeared that she had been strangled, but the decomposition made it difficult to tell exactly what had happened. And so Ted Bundy was indicted for the murders of Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, as well as the attempted murders of Cheryl Thomas, Kathy Kleiner, and Karen Chandler, as well as 2 counts of burglary. His indictment was read to him July 27th, 1978. The sheriff, Ken Katsaris, read his indictment to him in front of a room full of press to demonstrate that he had power over him. But I'm like, you're giving this person who has proven himself to be this huge attention whore more attention, and he watch Ted Bundy flip the power, and it throws him off, and you can just tell it's actually wild to watch that. So I don't really think it worked like he had hoped, but he is still so proud of what he did, and he straight up told interviewers that he does not care what you think if you criticize him on it. He's so proud of what he did.
Damn.
So go off, Ken. At some point in between now and his trial beginning, investigators had crafted a search warrant to search his mouth and get a bite mark comparison. When they took him to the dental office, he started like freaking out. But after reading the warrant, he let them take his bite mold. He told the officer, quote, "Do what you have to do, Ken. You know I'm not a violent person," end quote.
Okay.
Which, okay. 4 dental experts compared his molds to the marks, and all 4 concluded that he had left the bite mark. And then in May 1979, he rejects a plea deal that would take the death penalty off the table if he admits to murdering Bowman, Levy, and Leach. At this point, he's still convinced he's going to get away with it. On June 25th, 1979, his trial begins, and it was supposedly the first trial to be televised nationally. So again, giving him more attention that he's seeking. He represents himself again, but has the help of public offenders as well. His trial was moved to Miami because they were worried about the jury pool in Tallahassee being biased. That happened a lot with a lot of his cases. And then on July 18th, 1979, bite mark analysis has entered the chat. Forensic dentist Richard Suveron compared large photographs of Bundy's teeth as well as a mold to the bite marks found on Lisa Levy's butt and declares them a match. And this was the main source of physical evidence tying him to the murder.
It's like, I completely believe that Bundy did it, but bite mark, man. Bite mark.
I know. It's so bad. The 3 survivors from the Chi Omega attack, Karen Chandler, Kathy Kleiner, and Cheryl Thomas, all testified at his trial. And I'm so proud of them for doing that with their heads held high. Hearing them speak about what it was like for them to testify was kind of wild, because they were going in like you don't have this power over me. I get to leave. You don't. You didn't win kind of thing, which takes such incredible strength, I feel like, after experiencing that level of assault.
Yeah.
On July 24th, 1979, the jury deliberated for less than 7 hours before finding him guilty of murdering Lisa and Margaret and attempting to murder Kathy, Karen, and Cheryl. 1 week later, he was sentenced to death for the murders. And at his sentencing trial, the judge said to him, quote, "The court finds that both of these killings were indeed heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and that they were extremely wicked, shockingly evil, vile, and the product of a design to inflict a high degree of pain and utter indifference to human life. This court, independent of, but in agreement with the advisory sentence rendered by the jury, does hereby impose the death penalty upon the defendant, Theodore Robert Bundy. It is further ordered that on such scheduled date that you'll be put to death by a current of electricity sufficient to cause your immediate death, and such current of electricity shall continue to pass through your body until you are dead." End quote.
It's crazy how specific they have to be about that because, like, what if you come back?
Right? It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it will continue to pass until you are dead is kind of wild, but necessary, I feel like. Ted kind of responded saying some bullshit, and then the judge continues saying, quote, "Take care of yourself, young man. I say that to you sincerely. Take care of yourself. It is an utter tragedy for this court to see such a total waste of humanity as I've experienced in this courtroom. You are a bright young man. You'd have made a good lawyer, and I would have loved to have you practice in front of me, but you went another way, partner. I don't feel any animosity towards you. I want you to know that. Take care of yourself." End quote.
I hate that so much.
Yeah. And so I didn't read that with the correct emotion. And I've seen a lot of posts where they're arguing whether the judge was like on his side versus like, this is a backhanded compliment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you could have, like, why'd you do this? You could have done so much. Instead, you chose to do this, and now you need to suffer the consequences for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know. There's a very interesting conversation around that, I feel like.
I could see both sides to it. Like, it does sound
Mhm.
like there's some backhandedness to it, but like for him to end it the way he does, like,
Yeah.
I don't feel any animosity towards you. Like, just take care of yourself. We don't
Yeah,
need
like,
to mention that, actually. You're a
Yeah.
shitty human being.
yeah, I
Right?
do have
Why?
animosity
Yeah.
towards you.
Yeah. I
You've
actually have
done
quite a bit.
horrific, terrible things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I find it really odd that he's like, "I sentence you to death via electric chair, but take care of yourself." Like,
Yeah.
life's
Yeah,
hard,
right?
Enjoy
Joe.
the time. Yeah. Enjoy the last couple of days, months, years, whatever on this earth, you know?
Yeah. But if
Yeah.
you watch some of the videos and you read some of the transcripts, like, there is animosity from the judge toward Ted
Okay.
Bundy. Like,
Okay.
so
Okay.
yeah. And when you hear him say it, you're like, I get it a little bit more now, but taking it out of context, it does sound like he was
Right.
siding with Ted Bundy. And like, who knows for sure?
Mhm.
I'm not putting words in the judge's mouth, but
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Just like side note, there's a movie where Zac Efron plays Ted Bundy called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. I had no idea that was like a direct quote from the judge. That's neat.
yeah, that movie is so good. They did a really good
It is.
job.
Yeah, they did. Zac Efron
Um,
plays a good Bundy in the kindest way possible.
and I do talk about that at the end, especially in terms of like media romanticizing him. But
Mhm.
even now, media was romanticizing him. Like, they
Yeah.
very accurately portrayed the feelings that were happening in 1979, 1980, because
Mm.
so many people were kind of fighting with conflicting emotions of like, oh, this beautiful man couldn't do that. And so they
Mhm.
were like, it's a disservice to have a beautiful man play Ted Bundy. But it's like, no, that's how people viewed him. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's not disrespectful to the victims. It's genuinely the experience that was of the time.
yeah, it's kind of forcing us to feel the feelings that everyone else was feeling, which I think is kind of cool.
Mhm.
Anyway, January 7th, 1980, the trial for Kimberly Leach's death started in Orlando, Florida. One of the eyewitnesses was a firefighter who saw him lead Kimberly into his van and didn't stop him, just was like, "Go off, King." And there were also cloth fibers, that matched, found on both the killer and Kimberly, I guess. On February 9th, 1980, Bundy was found guilty of Kimberly's kidnapping and murder and was sentenced to death. The jury took 45 minutes to deliberate before coming back with a guilty verdict. Also, during his trial for the death of Kimberly, he proposed to Carol Boone while she was on the stand, acting as a witness to his to his character. They had been dating or seeing each other throughout his entire trial process, and he was like, so he took advantage of this, like,
what kind of woman do you need to be?
She was like, I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but she was batshit crazy. And so she was so in love with him and was like vehemently convinced that he was innocent and that he wasn't going to get convicted. And like, she straight up says, like, there's an interview of her saying, like, what he's on trial for now doesn't concern me. What he's done in the past doesn't concern me. Like, he's innocent. We're in love. Like, that's not who he is. He wouldn't do that. And she was just so convinced that, like, and she has known him since 1974. And so she's kind of like been in love with him for 6 years at this point.
She's got some crazy rose-colored glasses on.
Oh, man. Like, it is, and it only gets wilder. So, he proposes to her while she's on the stand. He took advantage of an obscure Florida law that said that a marriage declaration in front of a presiding judge was counted as a legal marriage when worded in a specific way.
What?
So he's like, will you marry me? And she's like, yes. And he's like, then I do hereby marry you. And it's that phrase that makes it like legally binding or whatever.
No paperwork or anything? Because you would need like a marriage certificate and all of those things to...
Yeah. I don't know.
What the heck?
So they got married during the trial of the rape and murder of a 12-year-old.
Wow.
Wow, that's so romantic.
Wow. Which, like, why?
No.
Especially as her.
So
like, how does your
fucked up.
conscience, like, your boyfriend is on trial for the rape and murder of a 12-year-old, and he proposes to you on the stand, and you're like, yeah, this is the time, this is the place, this is, like, this is
everything I could ever hoped and dreamed of.
It's a great foundation for a relationship and marriage, honestly.
Like, so true.
So she's like the OG, like...
Oh, man.
Anyway, it gets worse. Somehow, they were allowed to have sex while he was locked up, and they conceived a child together. So their child was born while he was on death row in 1982. Her name is Rose Bundy, and they're just this picture-perfect family, aside from the fact that he murdered multiple women and was currently on death row, but that just didn't seem to bother Carol. And there's pictures of them just as this family, and it's just certifiable. Like,
that's fucked up.
I don't like it.
No.
So she ended up divorcing him in 1986, 3 years before he was executed. I'm not really sure why, but there were rumors that he was going to start confessing, and up until now, Carol kind of believed he was innocent. So it was quite upsetting for her when she was like confronted with the fact that he had done all of these horrible things that he was convicted for.
After sitting through the trials.
Not that she wasn't confronted countless times over the years.
With evidence in court, all of these things. Wow.
Sorry, wouldn't you think your boyfriend that has escaped prison like 2 or 3 times, don't you wonder why he's trying to escape prison?
Right? Just, anyway, her and Rose moved out of Florida and tried to live just like a low-key life, kind of keep to themselves, because they were like infamous for being Ted Bundy's family. She ended up passing away at the age of 70 in January of 2018. That's kind of the end of her story. I didn't look into Rose Bundy. I'm kind of just, it's not her fault. Her father is who he was.
Yeah.
So, on February 5th, 1986, the first death warrant is signed in the Chi Omega case by Governor Bob Graham. On February 26th, Supreme Court stays the March 4th execution. On May 5th, the High Court lifted the stay, so he could be executed again. On May 22nd, Governor Bob Graham signs the second death warrant in the Chi Omega case on the same day that the appeals of the Leach conviction reached the U.S. Supreme Court. So throughout this time, Bundy has been appealing all of his convictions. On July 1st, the U.S. Appeals Court temporarily stays Bundy's execution scheduled for the following day in the Chi Omega case. On July 2nd, the appeals court permanently stays execution to give the case full consideration.
Damn.
Then on
What more
October
is there to
20,
consider?
right?
Yeah.
Like, it's done. Leave it alone. On October 21st, Governor Bob Graham signs the first death warrant for the Leach murder. On November 18th, Ted Bundy gets a stay of execution just hours before his scheduled execution to determine his mental competency during his 1980 trial, which...
He literally defended himself.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
13 months later, a district judge rules that he was fully competent for the trial and even calls him a diabolical genius. So they're like, hey, we can proceed with the execution. Yeah.
Can't believe it took them 13 months to determine that, though.
Right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Then, January 17th, 1989, Governor Bob Martinez signed the second death warrant in Kimberly Leach's case. January 21st, 1989, over the next several days, he confessed to many law enforcement agents. He told FBI Special Agent Bill Hagmaier that he killed 30 people in California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and Florida between 1973 and 1978.
That's so
I
crazy.
believe that there are more murders before 1973. I didn't add them, though. He confessed to the 8 Seattle killings and 15 more in Oregon, Utah, and Colorado. And he also gave more information on dozens of other unsolved cases. But again, like, you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt because he's Ted Bundy.
Mm-hmm.
And then on January 23rd, after admitting to so many murders, he sits for an interview with evangelist James Dobson and blames his behavior on his addictions to alcohol and pornography. And the U.S. Supreme Court rejects an emergency stay of execution by a 5-4 vote that evening. So he is being executed the next day. His luck has run out. On the morning of January 24th, 1989, he was strapped to the electric chair around 7 a.m. and killed. His last words were, "Give my love to my family and friends," which pisses me off because that's something I think many of his victims would have liked to have done.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
he was declared dead by 7:16 a.m. and roughly 200 people gathered outside, cheered when they learned that he had died.
Good.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there were so many crowds outside the prison cheering and singing or like protesting what was going to happen. And the videos are very hard to watch because you're kind of torn with like, yes, he was such a despicable person, but also like, why are we finding such joy and merriment in the death of a person? Like, do you know what I mean? Though,
Person
like,
versus the amount,
Yeah.
though, right? Like I'd
Yeah.
be there cheering. It's easier.
Yeah,
to
I
Go
can
ahead.
totally see both sides of the coin. Like it's like how much better are we for cheering about the death of a person when the reason he's being put to death is he also killed countless people. It's like we're obviously better than him because he did it by his own hands and it's his fault he
Yeah.
got executed. But yeah, no, it's execution is like a really murky topic.
Right? It just introduces such a moral dilemma, I feel like.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, he's such an awful person, but are we any better if we kill him? You know?
Yeah. I would have liked to see him get treated really shitty in prison for his whole life, but at the same time, that costs a lot of money to the public. So
Yeah.
I would say too, like I think a part of where that cheering may come from too is the knowledge that he can't do this to anyone else. He is
Yes.
a
Yeah.
multiple time escapee. He has killed however many people, but confirmed for at least 3 or 4, whatever.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of that joy is thank God, like he can't.
We're safe.
We're safe. He can't do this to anyone else. So I think it may
Yeah.
be less of a woohoo death to this man. It's a this is long overdue and he can't kill anyone else. At least from my
yeah,
point of
definitely.
view.
No,
Yeah.
totally.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, it's just such
Yeah.
such an
Yeah, 'cause
interesting conversation to have about
I don't
it.
think he would ever have a chance of rehabilitation. Like I think this was who he was and there's nothing we could do to make him safer for the public. So
Yeah, and he's so manipulative. Like, who knows what would have happened? And like, had we kept him alive to figure out where the other victims were buried, like, would he have given true information or was he just stalling? Like, what?
mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, he was cremated and his ashes were supposedly spread over the mountains in Washington where several of his victims were found. I really hope that's not true.
That
That is
seems
so
so
disrespectful to
disrespectful.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Holy shit, yeah.
Yeah. So I really hope that's not true.
They should put him in
For
a toilet or like the dump or something.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
He deserves
That's
eternity in
funny.
a landfill.
Yeah.
For his last meal, he had steak, eggs, hash browns, and coffee. If you wish to see pictures of his dead body after being electrocuted, you can find that on Murderpedia and Photo
Wow.
Gallery 9. Was
Wow.
not expecting to see that, I'll tell you that much.
Damn, yeah.
One of his post-conviction lawyers actually stopped practicing law after his execution due to how much it impacted her. She was one of the first people that he confessed to in order to make a deal, and his case was her first case out of law school.
Oh my god.
So
Oh,
she
what a
was kind of
sin.
just like thrown into the deep end, and she was like, it's kind of messed up that like we're doing so much to save this person who had so obviously done it and is just this awful person. So it really, really impacted her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to kind of end off his story, I just want to reiterate that this is not a complete list of his victims, as the true number will never be known. I'm very sorry to all the families who had children taken by him. He is a truly, truly despicable man, and we would do well to remember that. And one of his survivors said that he is not to be glorified, he is to be damned.
Absolutely.
And I agree. That's
Yeah.
very well said. Just some notes or whatever. We kind of talked about it, like Zac Efron being cast as him. There was a lot of uproar about it because they felt that a attractive person shouldn't be playing this terrible, terrible man. But personally, I think that they did a good job by casting him. Like, we kind of already had this conversation. We don't need to have it again. But like,
yeah,
it was
like,
just an
it's-
accurate portrayal, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, you do forget how horrible his crimes were because everyone just focuses on how attractive he was and how that made it easier for him to get away with these crimes. And then as soon as you start researching or learning more about the crimes, you realize that it's so awful and everyone's just being clouded by his looks.
Yeah, and they're crowded by like his education and like his
Mhm.
charm, and yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
that doesn't
it's
make you a good
wild.
person.
No. And no one really knows when or where he first started killing. His known aliases were Rex Bundy, Ted Cowell, Theodore Robert Cowell, Theodore Robert Nelson, and just Bundy.
Could even get creative thinking about like
Right?
different aliases.
Right? I do want to know where Rex came from because that's the most like out there. And then I just have some recommendations if you want to learn more about Ted Bundy and his victims. You should watch Ted Bundy Falling for a Killer on Prime Video, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile on Netflix, Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes. That's very good. You should read the Bright Young Women book by Jessica Knoll. So Jessica had reached out to Kathy Kleiner and they had written this fictionalized story about some of the victims of Ted Bundy. She does a very good job making it very victim focused and it's really well done.
The one thing I really liked about Bright Young Woman too is she doesn't name the killer once or like doesn't give him a name. It's just the killer, the guy kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, no.
Because it should be the victims in focus. Like they're the ones that had their lives taken.
Exactly. The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. She worked with Ted Bundy at some point, and so this is her book telling people about what it was like to kind of be around him. And then The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy, is also a book. It was written by his girlfriend, Elizabeth Kendall. I haven't read The Stranger Beside Me or The Phantom Prince, but I would like to because I feel like they offer very unique perspectives. And that's all I have on Ted Bundy. Sorry that we're an hour and a half in. There was so much on him, and I feel like I still missed like major pieces, but you'll just
I
have to
feel like
go
we
and
could
watch.
have like a full hour and a half conversation too on bite mark analysis too, which just is, if we had the time we would, but
I feel like some of the main things for bite mark analysis is like skin is so malleable that it moves so much. It's so hard to get an accurate representation of what your teeth look like.
Well,
and also bruising isn't an accurate way to tell what happened. There was one more thing that I feel like just lividity and like it just is so wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to hear us get heated about it, episode 25, this was 4 years ago, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Holy
That is crazy. Wow.
we did Wayne Bowden and forensic odontology, and I feel like that was a good episode where we talked about a lot of the issues with forensic odontology. So it may be a good one to pair with this episode to get that that side, the forensic side to it.
Yeah, I also feel like, especially with forensic odontology, you either fully, completely believe in it or you
Yeah.
hold no stock in it.
Yeah.
And it's one or the other. And the people who fully, completely believe in it are so
obnoxious.
Yeah. Like I'm remembering whatever documentary we watched about it with like Dr. Michael West, just like going off about how great bite mark analysis is. And I'm like,
yeah.
You're so full of yourself.
You're biting a soft object. Like there's no like okay, anyway, yeah, it was wild.
Hence the hour and a half that could be
25.
Yeah, that it could expand into. No, but I appreciate all of the like in-depth research you did too. I feel like I've seen and like movies and known about the crimes and like key things about him, and I think it was just fascinating that the thing you know about Ted Bundy, I feel like everyone would just know that he was this handsome law student, and then it's not until you really delve deep to see how horrific of a human he was. And how his crimes could expand much more than what we know for sure right now.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we will never know that in a way.
Right.
Unless things like evidence is found, bodies are found, which it's been a couple decades, so maybe not, but
it's hard to say. Yeah.
Hard to say.
Yeah. And I just feel
find
like
some scattered bones, and that's about it.
Yeah.
If anything.
I feel like if this case had taken place in a time when DNA was like easily accessible, it would have been very different because it hadn't been invented yet. Like DNA didn't start becoming a tool until 1985.
Yeah.
And at that time, he was already on death row.
Yeah. And even then, the initial DNA that was used isn't to the same capability and extent of where we're at now.
Exactly.
So wild. So cool. Thank you, though. Our next episode, we're going to be touching on the Bathtub Girls. This is a local, Canadian case, which was actually suggested by a listener of ours. So I'm really excited to delve into it. I knew nothing about them, so I'm excited to share it with you guys from Ontario, Canada. So kind of wild. But yes, so that is the Bathtub Girls. If you guys have any recommendations or case suggestions, feel free to let us know. You can reach us out on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, or TikTok at What the Forensics. Our website is whattheforensics.ca. This has all of your information on us, our episodes, source notes, all that fun stuff. We also have like a contact form there if you want to send us a recommendation there, or our email at whattheforensics@gmail.com. This has been another episode of What the Forensics. We hope you learned something this time around, and we will see you next time.
Bye. Just a reminder to everyone that we are not professionals in the forensic science field. We are just interested in forensics and want to share what we are learning with our listeners. We're trying to give you the most accurate information, but we are human and can make mistakes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you next week.